Hi there, dear friends. Kalidas here to offer some astrological insights on Monday. What's the date today? May 11th, 2020. Happy to be here and thank you for joining me. Today we're going to be discussing a couple of the energies that were left out last time. I spoke about the planets and their correlation to the chakras in the human anatomy. But there's two more planets in every Vedic chart. One is called Rahu, and the other is called Ketu. These are known as the shadow planets. They are the shadows on our moon. They are the energies in our own mind that cause us to wander away from the present moment. Rahu is responsible for us wandering into the future, and Ketu is responsible for us wandering into the past. God did not give us the power to change our past, nor did He give us the power to correctly perceive our future. And so you see these two shadow planets, that they get their names because they're a little bit shady. We think we know something about our future, but we don't. It often turns out a lot different than we think it's going to. So Rahu is inherently unstable. And it's that part of your mind that projects into the future and creates things like stress and worry, anxiety, and fear. But what if we use Rahu the way that God intended? Rahu symbolizes the upward current that moves through your nervous system when you inhale. And Ketu is the downward current that goes through your nervous system when you exhale. And this is the revolution of the energy around the inner universe and the planets relating to the chakras, like I spoke of last week. But Rahu goes up the spine and gets us all excited about things to come. That's what it sounds like. And Ketu sounds like this. And so they correspond to your breath. And I'm going to speak a little bit about them today because the spiritual path and finding enlightenment is about ultimately neutralizing these two forces. The science of Kriya Yoga is a perfect tool to neutralize these two forces that rotate around the spine. Kriya Yoga teaches us how to become aware of these two forces and to gradually learn how to control these two forces, and ultimately to withdraw our energy into the deep central spine, beyond past or future, into the eternal presence of the soul or God. So when we meditate, we learn a lot about Rahu and Ketu, because what do we do when we try to meditate? We sit and we want to be here in the present moment, but our mind immediately is overcome by either Rahu or Ketu, either the past or the future. The future will create all sorts of excitement, and this is why some people say, I can't meditate, my body's too restless. Well, that would likely be because Rahu is too much dominating in the mind, and he's giving you messages about things you're going to go and do later. And so therefore sending signals to the body to get up and move. So how do we come into the present moment? There are many different ways: devotion, chanting, praying, using pranayama techniques to neutralize these two forces of past and future. Yes, all these things are great. But what do you remember from the time in your life when you fell in love? Probably when you were with the object of your love, the person you had fallen in love with. Nothing else really mattered. You were just there with them. And this is the goal of the spiritual path, is just to be here now with God in every moment. So Rahu and Ketu, one is the past, can hold lots of things like regret and feelings of unworthiness because of our dark past. So Ketu can be very shadowy over the mind when we're thinking negatively about ourselves, or when we can't seem to break an old destructive habit. We can stagnate and become depressed. That's another part of Ketu. And then Rahu, another shadow planet, that's us looking at the future. And if you had to guess, what is American culture? Is it more Rahu or is it more Ketu? If Rahu is looking towards the future and getting all excited about securing it, I would say that that's the United States. And of course, the United States does have a strong Rahu energy in its chart. But what is security to the United States? A lot of people, I would say, would say that money and becoming wealthy is security. And that seems to be the goal that they breed through their education systems and the other systems. So what's going on for the United States at this time? I have the birth chart here. It's very interesting because Saturn and Jupiter, the great battle between light and darkness, the great revelation of what's really going on behind the scenes, Saturn and Jupiter are going to create something in the USA's chart in the second house of material security and money. And that is going to happen over the next few years until January of 2023. But next is the moon. In the chart of the USA, it has an Aquarius moon. What does that mean? It means that the USA is in a process, a 7 to 7.5 year cycle called Sati Sati. And what happens during Sati Sati? The shadows get pointed out on our moon. Saturn comes in and points at the moon, which would be the psyche of our culture, the ways of our culture, the habits, the procedures, and the dharma, the goodness, the innate, I would call it dharma, but let's just say righteousness of our culture. And if that's not going well, if there's anything out of place there, it will likely have to do with the security, the material security of the United States. So, yes, that's being threatened. A lot of people are signing up for unemployment. They're talking about greater and greater trillions in debt and all of this. Yes, the USA is going through a massive change. Don't worry. Great masters have predicted these times, and they said that the United States of America will come out okay. In fact, more spiritual in the long run, but it requires that the East and the West exchange qualities. And this would be like Rahu and Ketu balancing. The United States is a Rahu culture. We have spent a lot of time and a lot of money trying to secure the future. And that's been done mostly in a financially investigative way. But what is Rahu? If we can't really see the future, why did God give us the power to guess about it or to think that we can? And the answer that I have come up with personally is faith. The reason that we can't see the future is because we're here on this earth to learn about faith, the power of faith in our divine Heavenly Father and Mother who can see the future and has arranged it masterfully, that it contained the exact lessons we came here on this earth to learn. And the East is more Ketu, more inward, more based on tradition. If you go to India, you'll see many long traditions and long-standing traditions, and that is the more Eastern thing. But what is Satan? Satan is the serpentine force. And if there's one satanic force in everyone's horoscope, it's Rahu and Ketu. It's this force that causes us to wander out of the present moment where alone God's guidance can be found. And we wander either into future worry or into past regret or stagnation or depression of some type. So how do we get out of this satanic force we call Rahu and Ketu? It's called the present moment. And meditation and pranayama will take you there, as well as affirmation and practicing the presence of the divine in your life. Yogananda made a beautiful statement. He said, cultivate the habit of mentally whispering to God all throughout the day, and you will see a change in yourself you like very much. I've always very much liked that statement and have found it completely true. Cultivate the habit of mentally whispering to God. What does this do? It brings you into the present moment. And it dissolves or balances those psychological nodes, those shadows on your moon, the Rahu and the Ketu. What did Swami Kriyananda say about Satan, this satanic serpentine force? He said, Satan is anything that tries to discourage you. You know, in India, they are a Ketu culture, and they do have long-standing traditions, and I'd like to just point out courageously one very big discouraging tradition, and that is of the belief in the long duration of Kali Yuga. An error was made in the mathematics of the ages of humanity during the Dark Ages in India. This was thousands of years ago. Maybe 1,000 years ago, or it could have been 500 years ago. Forgive me for saying thousands, I don't mean that. But sometime during the Dark Ages, the Yuga experts were finding that the math didn't add up. And rather than go into why that is, because it would take too much time, I'll just say what they decided to do was they lengthened Kali Yuga from a 1,200-year cycle to just about 300,000 year cycle. And I could be off on those exact numbers, but it's that big of a difference. Very discouraging to think that we'll be in Kali Yuga for several 100,000 more years. An error crept into the almanacs during the Dark Age that created this perception. And that is a very satanic, dark force, I would say, a discouraging one. As Swami Kriyananda said, that Satan is anything that tries to discourage you. Well, during the darker ages, things happen that need to be recorrected. And David Frawley said that the renovation of astrology is one of the most important works of Dwapara Yuga. And that's what's happening. More and more astrologers are waking up to the spiritual approach to transcending our karma, rather than binding us to some dark tradition that does create discouragement. And if you've developed a resistance or a distrust of astrology, I don't blame you. So have I. And that's why I've been drawn to study its reality and discovered that it's an ancient Vedic science made by enlightened beings to help us. So in case you have a bad taste in your mouth for it, that may be because of the Dark Ages and what happened to astrology during that time. But we are now coming out of it, and the United States is in a great transition at this time. It's in the Sati-Sati cycle. And what does that mean? It means that a lot of darkness gets pointed out and light comes in. And that can at first feel very uncomfortable. It can feel like a lack of security. If you're in the United States, you probably feel that. I know that I do. But rest assured, this moon will be cleaned. The psyche, the psychology, the approach to life of America will be cleaned in the next 5 to 7 years. And it will be intense during the heavy wash cycles. But cultivate faith in God at this time. Give your future into His hands. This is the way to dissolve or to neutralize that Rahu force. Give your future. Say, I can't see the future for a reason. It's because I'm meant to cultivate faith. It's not about frantically running around trying to secure it. Yes, we need to be practical. But if you find yourself living in worry, your Rahu has a little bit too much hold of your mind. And each of us, during the United States Sati-Sati of moon purification, of shadow revelation, each of us should be doing our part for this great country and for this great world that God created, to master our own Rahu, to bring our own sense of worry about the future and put it in God's hands and say, I'm a spiritual warrior. I live in this moment with faith in the power of love to guide me, and I don't need to overcomplicate it much more than that. As Sri Yukteswar, a great wisdom master, said, God is simple. Everything else is what makes life complex. That's a paraphrase. His actual words were, God is simple, everything else is complex. But so Saturn will go through the United States chart first of financial security, of material security. And that's what we'll experience the next couple of years. And then in 2023, he'll be right on top of the moon. The moon is in Aquarius in the United States chart. And what does this mean? Well, this is an idea sign. It's a sign of spiritual teachings of consciousness. It's a sign of world consciousness. And the moon of the United States is there. And the United States, supposedly, is all about freedom of religious perception, of perspective, freedom of choice, freedom of speech. It's all about freedom. And the moon is in the third house in the United States chart of free will. So nothing's going to take that away. The United States was born for this, but it is going to go through a transitional procedure now for the next 5 to 7 years that may appear as if these freedoms will be taken from us, but I really don't think that that will ultimately prevail, because it's just the way that God works. He brings problems into our lives. They're disguised as problems, but they're really blessings in disguise. And that's exactly what's going to happen to the United States. It's going to go through a great purification, and it's already begun. So rest assured, God is in charge. Release your worry, your own Rahu energy, by bringing it with a deep inhalation up the spine and offering it here and saying, Lord, I love you and I trust you. I don't need to overcomplicate my life with frantic obsession about the future. You have the future. You care for me. Not a sparrow nor a grain of sand falls without his sight. So I mentioned Satan earlier, and I apologize if that word, if you don't like that word. It is the name of a force in creation that wants to keep us bound to delusion, that God gave power to do just that so that creation could go on. But if you'd like more understanding on the Christian teaching, on the yoga of Christ, on the actual teachings that the great Master Jesus brought to this world, and that were totally corrupted after his crucifixion, and hidden, and completely edited, then I would recommend a couple of different books. One is this book. It's called Revelations of Christ by Swami Kriyananda. Another one is The Second Coming of Christ. This is a much bigger book. So if you have to just read one, read Revelations of Christ. And what would be the reason for us doing this? Well, a healthier understanding of Christianity, because it's on the decline because of incorrect philosophy. And Jesus was a yogi. And if you pray to him and ask for him to reveal to you what you need to find in this life, he will direct you. And you know what? He brought me to Paramahansa Yogananda and the path of yoga. I was born into Christianity and took it very seriously most of my life. And Jesus guided me to his real teaching again, the second coming of Christ. And I personally believe that that was Paramahansa Yogananda. But that's just a personal perspective that I choose to believe. I don't mean to try to convince you of anything. But so today we talked about the shadow planets, Rahu and Ketu, and we spoke about the United States chart being a very Rahu culture. It's going to have a big transformation happening on its moon. And Rahu and Ketu are known as the lunar nodes in Western astrology, in case you're wondering about that correlation. So remember, these forces are in your mind, and they will, if you allow them to dominate, they won't allow you to meditate. So I'd like to tell a quick story in closing, and it's about Kung Fu Panda. Do you know Kung Fu Panda? It's a really great movie. You should watch it if you like movies that have lots of wisdom. And in it, there's a guru named Master Oogway. And Master Oogway, at a certain point, tells his disciple, the Kung Fu Panda, who's getting really worried about the future. Kung Fu Panda is very scared. He has to fight this epic battle against this great dark warrior. And Kung Fu Panda says a very beautiful statement. I mean, not Kung Fu Panda, his guru says it to Kung Fu Panda. Master Oogway, he says, "Yesterday is history, and tomorrow is a mystery, but today is a gift. And that is why we call it the present." It's a very beautiful statement, and it struck me when I first heard it, and I remembered it. because it very much relates to these shadow planets, the lunar nodes, that Rahu and Ketu. Rahu is the future, and it will always be a mystery. It will always be unstable. Even for the greatest billionaires or richest people, they still don't know their future. And then lastly is Ketu, that is our past. Yesterday is history, which is implying we don't have any power to change it. But today is a gift, and that is why we call it the present. So how do we center ourselves in the present? I've given a couple recommendations of chanting, of devotional heart whispers to the divine. Go out and do what you love. You'll see that puts you in the present moment. That's why you love it. I love skateboarding. Why do I love it? Because it brings me into the present moment. I love to play music. Why do I love it? Because it brings me into the present moment. And you yourself, if you don't have something to bring you into the present moment, be on the lookout, pray for it. Look for a new hobby, a new interest of some type. Go for a run, go out in nature. Grab a book or something that you feel will be uplifting to your consciousness. But most importantly, develop a meditation practice. Meditation is all about training your mind to dwell here and now in the presence of God. So I hope you've enjoyed our time together today. I'd be happy to answer any questions or recommendations for future satsang ideas. I welcome. It doesn't mean I'll get to it right away, but I'd be happy to have more correspondence with those of you who enjoy these videos. And thank you so much for your support. It's a real joy to be able to share, and to receive your positive feedback is all the more joyful. So God bless you, and be careful in the next 6 days as the moon moves through Saturn's area in the zodiac. Remember to open your heart, that Venus is the enjoyment of life, and that happens in the present moment. And Venus is strong in Taurus until July 29th. So amidst all the other planetary battles going on right now, if you can get into your own heart chakra and establish a strong faith and trust in the power of the divine to guide this crazy process forward, it's not up to you, even in your own personal life. Yes, we put one foot in front of the other, but we don't need to get tied up in worry and fear and regret of past actions. Those are the shadow planets. Identify them, raise them up the spine if you can with your breath. Surrender your future into God's hands, because He deeply cares for you, and He will fulfill His promise to guide you, to enlighten you, and to love you, and to receive your love. So if you have not cultivated a meditation practice yet, I highly recommend checking out ananda.org. You'll find many free, completely valuable techniques of meditation and of philosophy that will help you understand more. So God bless you, and have a great day. All right, bye-bye.